Hello, I'm going to show you the simplest way to rig a tail in Live2d with some tips and tricks along the way. So with my art here, I have two layers, just simply this layer and the tail fluff layer. The absolute simplest way to rig a tail would only include one layer, so I'm going to show that first and also how to add the additional layer at the end. If you want the tail more complicated, you're going to want to have layers for shadows and other things, but I can get to that in a different video if you'd like. So we're going to start with just the tail. What we're going to start with is meshing it. You can auto mesh it, or you can put a little more detail into the mesh. I'm gonna just mesh this real quick. Okay, so I focused more on the outside of the mesh, with the inside just having some desolate parts in the middle. If you have complicated design in your tail, you're gonna want to follow that more closely. And the skinning method might also not be for you. The way we're gonna mesh the tail today is with a path deformer. So the amount of points you put on the path deformer is going to determine how many points you have for rotation. You're going to want to make sure you start at the anchor of the tail. For me, since I have the fluff up here, this is the base, but the base might be at the top. I would create 4 to 6 points, depending on how flowy you want it to be. I'll go ahead and create 6 since this is quite the narrow, long tail. So 1, 6. You want to go to 7 or 8, go ahead. You're just going to have a lot more physics settings. So now that I have these here, I'm going to want to go to modeling, skinning, use deformation path for skinning. As you see here, we have 11 parameters and 11 points of rotation. We're going to want to edit this in the physics window. So let's go modeling, physics settings. I've got one going from previous, but let's just add a new one. So we're going to go to add here. I'm going to name it tail test, but you can name it tail wag. And then depending on how many points of rotation you created, you're going to want to create that many pendulum settings. So I created 11. Right off the bat, you're going to want to lower this. I like to start with about 0.65. You can go up to about 0.8. And then I'll usually just edit this one slightly lower as well. But that's up to personal preference. And then your input, you're going to want to put on breath if you would like a more dynamic tail movement rather than just constantly swaying. I'll talk about that later in the video. But for now, let's put it on breath, effectiveness, 100. And let's go ahead and change this to angle as well. I'm going to change the angle to -45 to +45 to just give us more swaying. You could always change that to visually how you would like it. Every tail is different. And then for output settings, since we have already made 11 pendulum settings, just go ahead and select the whole folder for the tail. We're going to have it here. Now, the reason it's not moving yet is the scale isn't quite high enough to see movement. What you're going to do is just hit increase output. And wow, that's kind of a crazy tail. As you can see, we don't have enough deformers for this to look quite normal. So if you want a tail that actually wags this much, I would recommend not using the path deformation for skinning and creating your own warp deformers and such instead. If you'd like a tutorial on warp deformers, please let me know and I can go ahead and make that. The way that I'm going to kind of tone down these physics all at once is I'm going to change the effectiveness to about 25. Don't forget to save. Now, if you have an extra part like a tail fluff like me, you can go ahead and add it. So first I'm just going to auto mesh it. Yeah. I accidentally deleted standard deformation heavy, so I just created my own, which is called most, but again, I would go with the standard deformation heavy based off your mesh. And now that we have a mesh, we're going to want to hit this rotation deformer creation tool and just put one near the bottom there. And now what you can do is if you want this to have a normal wag like this, if that makes sense for your art, go ahead and keep this deformation tool or keep the rotation. But what I'm actually going to do is delete the rotation and instead on this tail fluff, add a warp deformer. So I'm going to do tail fluff, I guess. And so we have that here. What we're going to want to do is actually move this inside of the bottommost of what we have for the skinning already. So just select this and drag it into that rotation. Into the rotation. Okay, there we go. And then to check that it's actually like working. Yeah, you're mostly just going to want to test this. You can always just check in physics settings to see if it looks normal. So it looks normal. I just want to add one more pendulum for like the sway of this here. So what I'm going to do here is just duplicate or replicate parameter. I'm just going to rename it for simplicity. And then add 3 keyforms. And then here, select this. I'm going to actually add more warp divisions just so it looks a little bit cleaner. There we go. I'm going to go ahead and select maybe this many and rotate that. And then also use the deform brush tool to just kind of like do this. Okay. You can try reflecting it. I'm not positive it'll look good, but we can try. Actually not too bad. I'm gonna pick certain points and make them a little less noticeable. But otherwise, I think that looks pretty good. Again, if you want it less pointy, up the number of warp divisions, it's just dependent on how well your computer can run. So let's go ahead and go back into the physics settings, and we're going to want to add one more pendulum. Most likely going to want to keep this the same. And then output settings, go ahead and add one more pendulum, which is going to be the tail 11. Go ahead and increase that output again. And now the tail just has some extra motion. Now, one issue you create with having all of these rotation deformers is that if we want to actually move it with a warp deformer, you usually can't. I'll show you here. Hold Control to resize it, hold Alt to, make it more centered. But as you see, it doesn't work here. Definitely save here, because this is the most likely point where your computer's going to crash. But if you want to fix that, go ahead and select each of the rotation points. Modeling deformer, apply deformer to child elements. Now we've got the tail wagging pretty normally in under 13 minutes. That's about how long the original video took me to record. I'm going to show you how to make it more dynamic. So what you're going to need to do is add a param here and just do like maybe like tail input wave. Tail wave input. Let's do that here and also copy that to the param as well. Minimum, maximum, you can change that. Just make sure that it's equal with 0 on default. So now you're going to want to go to physics settings, and instead of have this on breath, make this on the tail wave input. So in the physics settings themselves, they won't work. We're going to need a VTube Studio plugin to actually make this work. The VTube Studio plugin that I'm using here actually isn't available to the public yet, as it is only in alpha. However, it is constantly being worked on. You can go check it out on X at VDynamics_VT. But as soon as it's out, you're able to set it up however you want with dynamic random movement. Let me know if you have any questions below.